bars, I just run it up. Never let a hard time humble us.
Hey you guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Sin Star. Back at it again with another video, with another vlog. Period. I thought this was a car broke down on the side of the road. I was gonna say, I know you lying. It's some cones though. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Instagram at the real Sin Star. I will drop it in the video. And I'm here on a little mini vacation to Montgomery. Came here to visit the museums, the civil rights museums and stuff like that. You know, you can never learn enough about history. My hair is throwing me off because, yeah, you know, natural life. But stay tuned if you want to know our experiences. Finally made it to our destination. Finally made it. So we are in Montgomery, Alabama at the Civil Rights Museum. It's nice and it's hot. We're waiting on our next destination, and I'm sleepy. We're at the Dexter Avenue King Memorial Legacy Center, but I'm not sure if we're gonna go in. We just left from the Civil Rights Memorial Center. It's not even on you. It's on me. I was talking.
I'm narrating. Welcome to Montgomery, y'all. This is an area story. She's into paper.
It's the real Sin Star.
Huh?
The real Sin Star.
Okay, good. We gotta get it together.
The Mother Emanuel shooting, where Dylan Roof did that. Heather Heyer being run over. There's a guy named Khalid Jabbar, who was killed by his neighbor because the neighbor thought he was Muslim. And then there are a few other ones. These placards there's some notable people like Emmett Till is up here. Medgar Evers is right there behind you. The 4 girls in the 16th Street bombing. And then there are the 3 gentlemen from the Mississippi burning case. Are y'all familiar? Yeah. This was like an FBI informant. Those 2 gentlemen next to them.
Look what you doing. Say hey to the camera. Look.
While they were
Say hey.
Easter. These 2 guys the Klan had heard rumors that there would be black Muslims coming from the north to the south with guns to like do like an uprising to retaliate against white people. And so what happened there was that they were taken into the woods and tortured, and then they were thrown into the river alive, chained to like heavy objects. The guy at the bottom, Charles Moore, was chained to a Jeep motor, and the guy at the top was chained to like railroad ties or something, something heavy. And they were thrown into the river alive. When they found the bodies, they couldn't find Henry D's head. And Charles Moore at the bottom, they only found his lower half, his body like separated. They never found his torso. They identified him through his dorm room key from college. It had his room number on it, and they called the college and confirmed that it was him.
And then when they were looking for these three.
Yeah. And so there's actually like recordings of the conversations between LBJ and the Attorney General at the time, and they were talking about it the day that they found the bodies, thinking that it was one of those three, but it turned out not to be one. Emmett Till, we know Emmett Till's story, right?
Yeah, they found out that she said fabricated.
Yeah, she came out and said she was lying, I want to say like less than 2 years ago, somewhere around there. But the interesting thing about his story too is that, you know, that picture went all the way around the world, and people didn't realize that people were using violence to make people follow Jim Crow laws. Like, and especially people were shocked that that could happen to a child too.
Yeah.
So that like when people who didn't deal with segregation started to realize that, it kind of changed people's perspective. So his death, even though it was tragic, it meant a lot in terms of bringing about awareness of the violence associated with enforcing segregation. And it actually happened about 3 months before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. So one of the things that she talks about, was the fact that she was thinking about him and thinking about the fact that things like that would continue to happen if she didn't do something. Willie Edwards happened here in Montgomery. He's right next to Emmett Till. Willie Edwards was a driver for Winn-Dixie. I don't know if y'all familiar. Winn-Dixie is a local grocery store chain. The Klan had heard the rumors that there was a black man who was dating a white woman, and so they heard that he was a driver for Winn-Dixie. Well, Willie Edwards was subbing for the person that they were looking for on the night that they abducted him. And so Willie Edwards, they set a trap for him at the county line, like blocked the road off, took him out of the truck, took him to a bridge and gave him a choice, either jump or we shoot you. And he actually jumped and then drowned in the Alabama River. And then nobody would bring charges. The grand jury wouldn't bring charges in that case because they couldn't prove that he had actually been murdered. They just said that he had drowned. But there was like an FBI informant that came out and he told exactly why they did it and everything, and exactly what happened. There's John Earl Reese at the bottom, and y'all probably haven't heard of him. John Earl Reese lived in Mayflower, Texas, and it was right after Brown versus the Board. They had started, one of the ways that local cities would avoid integration was that they would invest money in the black school in the hopes that black children wouldn't want to go to school with white kids. If the school is better, maybe you won't want to come to the other school. And so people got upset though that they had invested money in the black school in that city. And so one of the ways that they retaliated was to drive around in the black section of town doing what we consider to be drive-bys. So they would ride around and shoot to scare people. And the two people who killed him actually did it one time before. The first time they did it, they got sentenced to a $15 fine. And then the second time they did it, they actually shot him while he was in a cafe at like a gathering. The shooter, was caught. They took him to trial. He actually got convicted and sentenced to 7 years, but then the judge gave him a suspended sentence, which means that he doesn't serve any time in jail, and let him go and said don't have any more incidents, which is kind of horrific. But a lot of these cases, when we look at them, it either took a really long time for something to happen or nothing happened at all. In this case, Corporal Roman Ducksworth was a military guy who had come from Fort Ritchie back home to Taylorsville, Mississippi to visit his wife who had just had a baby. When he gets into town, he was asleep on the bus. He was on a Greyhound. He was actually mistaken for a Freedom Rider. And we know the Freedom Riders were the ones that were boarding the buses in the north, riding through the south, and they would, risking getting beat up. And that's a picture of a bombing of a bus, just to give you a sense of how dangerous that was to be a Freedom Rider. he was slapped. Corporal Roman Ducksworth was asleep. Sheriff gets on the bus, slaps him. They have a brief physical altercation, and then the sheriff actually shot him. It turns out that the sheriff knew Roman Ducksworth Sr., who was Corporal Roman Ducksworth's father. Roman Ducksworth Sr. was actually like a prominent businessman, owned some acres of land, and was well known in the community. The sheriff realized he knew him and went to him and apologized and said, had I known that was your son, I wouldn't have shot him. To which the father replied, it doesn't matter whose son he was, it matters that you took a life for no reason, right? And that just gives you a sense of like, this guy was not even involved in the civil rights movement and lost his life because somebody thought he was. So that gives you a sense of how dangerous it was and then how brave the people who were doing that work actually were, right? They were risking their lives. Medgar Evers, there's a movie about him called, is it Mississippi?
Oh, that was Mississippi.
Ghost of Mississippi.
Ghost of Mississippi.
Yeah. But he was the leader of the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He was the leader in Mississippi. So Medgar Evers was like an outspoken guy who talked about the need for integration and all that kind of stuff. And he wound up losing his life. Interestingly enough, he protected Emmett Till's great uncle when the great uncle wound up having to leave town after he testified in court. You know, his life was in danger. Medgar Evers was responsible for protecting that great uncle, Emmett Till's great uncle. But Medgar Evers was assassinated in front of his home. He was shot with a large caliber rifle from across the street by a guy named Byron D. Beckwith. Byron D. Beckwith was the prime suspect, and they actually had 2 trials before they actually convicted him in the 3rd trial. The first 2 trials ended in a hung jury and a mistrial, and then in 1994, which was about 31 years after Medgar Evers was killed, they finally convicted him, and he spent the last 7 years of his life in jail. The 4 girls from the 16th Street Farm, we're familiar with them?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 16th Street Baptist Church was actually targeted by a group called the United Klans of America. They're responsible for several deaths up here on this wall, like Michael Donald in the 80s. And then they're also responsible for Viola Liuzzo, the only white woman that I know of to be killed during the civil rights movement. But they bombed that church on purpose because there was civil rights organizing going on there. And then there was also some marches that left from that church, actually. When they killed those 4 girls in Birmingham, well, let me say this, Birmingham was a dangerous place. There were over 60 bombings where nobody was charged, indicted, went to jail, arrested, nothing. They died in one of those bombings, but the Klan actually held rallies to celebrate the fact that those 4 girls had gotten hurt that day. 2 men left one of those rallies and shot that boy right there, Virgil Ware. He was riding on the handlebars of his brother's bike. He was 13 years old, and he never even actually knew what had happened to the 4 girls that day. Just kind of was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was also another young man who died that day by the last name Robinson. One of the ways that the Klan kind of antagonized people was riding through the black sections of town. They would wave the rebel flag and yell at people and, you know, say whatever they were saying. And there were small gangs of black and white people fighting all over the city of Birmingham. And Robinson, I want to say his first name was James. James Robinson got into a fight in his neighborhood with some people who were coming into it. And then when the police were called, he turned to run and was shot in the back. So that's like kind of an instance of police brutality. And so a lot of times when I talk to groups, especially of young African Americans, I try to help them understand that when we see the riots in Baltimore, or we see what happened with Rodney King or Mike Brown and what happened in Ferguson, a lot of times there's a historical context that makes people even more upset about the fact that not a lot happens in the justice system in instances of police brutality, right? And not a lot happens historically. I'll tell you about this one. So this one happened in the county next to here. Excuse me, man, I'm sorry. Jonathan Daniels was actually killed in Lowndes County, which is the county west of here. So it goes Montgomery County, which is where we are, Lowndes County, and then Dallas County is where Selma is. They had been arrested. There was a group of civil rights workers that had been arrested, and they spent several days in jail. and it was the dead heat of summer. And so when they leave the jail, they go to the corner store to get something to drink because they were thirsty. When they arrived at the corner store, there was a sheriff's deputy by the name of Tom Coleman there. He pointed a shotgun at a lady I met, actually, Dr. Ruby Sales, and basically told her, "B, I'll blow your head off." She was pushed out of the way. Jonathan Daniels took the bullet for her. And then there was also another guy who was wounded that day but didn't die. And I want to say his last name was Morrison. Interestingly enough, they took the sheriff's deputy to trial. They arrested him and charged him, but he was acquitted by an all-white jury, and the jury actually shook his hand on the way out of court. So that's an instance in which the justice system didn't necessarily work too. This is Viola Liuzzo. Are we familiar with her? So Viola Liuzzo was a mother from Michigan. She's a white lady, for those of y'all who can't see. She saw the civil unrest in the South and decided that she wanted to help, so she came down and actually participated in the Voting Rights March. She actually drove a black passenger home, a black male passenger home, and was spotted by the Klan in Lowndes County, the county right next to here. When she was on the way home, she started, they chased her, and basically they chased her down and shot into the car and shot her in the face. And so she wrecks the car, and the black male passenger actually had to play dead because the Klansman who did it walked up to the car to make sure that she was dead, to make sure that they were both dead. It was very hard to get local juries to convict in those days, either because of racism or because of social pressure. So the federal government came in and brought conspiracy charges in this case, and it was the first case where they got a conviction for conspiracy to violate a person's civil rights. So they sentenced the people who did it to 10 years, which was a huge victory. Even though 10 years is not a lot of time for taking a life, it is something, right? Because in a lot of cases there was nothing for a long time. This guy, Lieutenant Colonel Lemuel Penn, was the second case where they brought federal conspiracy charges. Lieutenant Colonel Lemuel Penn was a teacher in DC, and he also worked for the reserves. And so he served a tour at Fort Benning, which is in Columbus, Georgia. It's on the Alabama-Georgia line. When his tour of duty was up, he figured it was safer to travel at night. So basically, at midnight, he calls home and says to his wife, "I'm on the way home." But he never made it out of North Georgia. There was a task force of the Klan in Athens, Georgia, which is towards North Georgia, called the Black Shirts. And basically they were like enforcers for the Klan, and they had heard that there would be black people in Georgia doing civil rights work. So when they see this carload of black men, there were several men in the car with them, they assumed that they were civil rights workers. So they ride past his car and actually shoot him in the head and neck area with a load of buckshot, which is a pretty deadly round. His case is significant. He's the second case where they successfully brought conspiracy charges, federal conspiracy charges, and they convicted the people who did this and sentenced them to 10 years. But I'm told they served about 2. But it was still like a landmark victory at the time.
We are at the Rosa Parks Museum on the time traveling bus.
Welcome to our Cleveland Avenue bus.
For you to remember
cool bus.
And what we have endured in the last 150 years. To do this, I will ask your driver to speed you back in time to the year 1838 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Mr. Rivers, please take us back.
The bus is actually moving.
Here we are in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1838. In this city, a little boy is making his living on the street, singing and dancing for pennies. His song is called Jump Jim Crow.
My name's Jim Crow.
A stage entertainer from up north, Mr. Tom Rice, watched watches the youngster with fascination. Mr. Rice gets an idea. Tom Daddy Rice would become famous. He would perform that little boy's song in cities all over the North and the South. And audiences thought his act was very, very funny. Tom Rice and many others who would follow portrayed Black Americans as being foolish and inferior people and created the desirability of segregation in the minds of many Southerners, as well as Northerners. The words Jim Crow came to mean black people, and also the effort to keep blacks separate and segregated from the world of white people. Laws were written that said exactly what black people could and could not do. In the South, slavery and segregation were legal. In the North, slavery wasn't legal, but there was still segregation. Now, let me show you how the government of the United States felt about black men and black women. Never mind that our Constitution said that all people were created equal. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney and most of the Supreme Court thought otherwise. Mr. Rivers, forward please to the year 1857 and St. Louis, Missouri. Let us meet Mr. Dred Scott and his family, all of whom are slaves. Trying to win their family's freedom from slavery through the courts for 11 years now. They believe they are entitled to their freedom because their owner had at one time taken them to live in free territory in the North. A St. Louis court supported their claim, but that decision was overruled and their case reached the Supreme Court of the United States. Today, they have received news that has crushed their hope for freedom. The Supreme Court has ruled that Dred Scott and his family and all slaves are the property of their owners, cannot be considered United States citizens, and can have no claim to freedom.
11 years, God. We've been told we were slaves, then we'll be free, then we'll be slaves again. And Mr. Taylor said we've never been free. Yeah, and he said we'd be subordinate and inferior human beings. That we're born to be slaves and nothing else. No more rights than a dog.
He lies. Justice Payne to be a slave owner. He's never going to talk that far. Don't mean he's right.
He's right enough to send us off to some old man who whoop us and send us to the field in this car. Hush, baby. Ain't nobody selling us. This is owned by Miss Irene. And she ain't got nothing, no bag. We still own just like some furniture, just like this here table. But maybe she free us. She's married to Master Champion, who is an abolitionist who don't want no slaves.
We hope you're right. We can hope.
Y'all don't know. And I'm just gonna make my way now. Listen.
Because of his efforts to gain freedom, Dred Scott became the most famous slave in America. The Dred Scott decision was a much disputed ruling and caused a stir across America. Northerners saw the decision as a way for slavery to spread into free states. Southerners saw the decision as reinforcing the idea of slavery, that African Americans were little more than property and didn't have rights as human beings. The controversy led almost directly to the Civil War. But there are other stories we should know. Let's go to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, not long before the Civil War began. It is estimated that 75,000 slaves escaped to the free northern states and to Canada in the years before the Civil War. Harriet Tubman and Henry Brown were two of them with different but equally astonishing stories. While they never actually met, had they done so, their conversation might have sounded like this.
And that's how I done it, Miss Tubman. And there will I be when I ship myself out of all Virginia. They up out there.
That box was much too small to hold you.
Old me it did. As slick as a hog in a wall. And then but that's a wall to keep me. Railroad agents down there can't reach, spend most of my trip upside down on my head.
We each goes off in our own way, Mr. Brown.
Box Brown, he calls me now.
Mr. Box Brown.
Many times you done knocked them back and never got caught. You be lucky as hell.
Not local, just a case of blending in.
Blending in?
I be small and I dress small. Look like Colewood slave child out shopping for master.
Say, you carry a pistol in that?
I do. Needs to be I use it on folks changing their minds. Had a passenger pregnant a candidate say he got to go back. I said, you be free or die. Soon enough, he decided he's ready to be free. First time I come off. I looked at my hands. Now I free to see if I was the same person. And that was such glory over everything. The sun came up like gold through the trees and over the fields. And I felt like I was in heaven. Glory, glory be.
Yes, indeed, Miss Tubman. Yes, indeed. Moving on now, Mr. Rivets. We have more stops to make. But before we go, let me remind you that Harriet Tubman blended in even better during the Civil War. She served as a spy for the Union armies, reporting Confederate troop movements to northern lands. Now, for those of you who are here, make yourself brave, because we've got a Civil War to get. It was a terrible time for Northerners and Southerners alike. Hundreds of thousands died, all horribly injured on both sides. The North didn't set out to free the slaves. It was fighting to preserve the Union. President Lincoln did proclaim an end to slavery in 1863, but only in the slave-holding Confederate states. It took Union victory to free all of the slaves. After the Union won the Civil War, federal laws and constitutional amendments were enacted that seemed to give us freedom and opportunity. We could get paid for our work, we could go to school, we could vote, we could even get elected to Congress. But in the South, the same old forces were trying to keep us back, keep us down, keep us separate through intimidation, violence, and terror. But listen to this.
No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States.
That was part of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. It means that denying us our rights as citizens is illegal. It is clear to me that even after the Civil War and the freeing of all the slaves, people in the South didn't want to listen. Remember the name Jim Crow? Well, Jim Crow laws have been passed. They keep us from voting, going to their schools, and getting certain jobs. stores, hospitals, hotels, and restaurants. In some places, we can't walk on their side of the street without permission. We have to sit in separate cars on trains, and the seats that are assigned to us are old and uncomfortable. We know these Jim Crow laws are wrong and unconstitutional, and we aren't going to give up so easily. We have rights, and we are willing to fight for them in the courts. Take us to New Orleans, Louisiana, to the year 1892. Tested his civil rights by riding in a whites-only railroad car. Because he looked white, he was selected by the Louisiana Civil Rights Organization to buy a first-class ticket on a train. He bought the ticket, sat in the first-class whites-only car. Then the train's conductor was told that Plessy was a Negro. You can imagine what happened next.
We know you be a color. If by color you mean Negro, then yes, I am somewhat a Negro. You see, my grandmother was an African descent, but all of my other ancestors were European. Bob says one drop of color, but you be a color through and through. You belong back there with the rest of them colors.
Make you cry.
If by your reasoning, I should be white, as I have more than a drop of white blood in my veins. Never mind. I'm an American citizen. Like a properly bought first-class ticket in jail, I'm entitled to stay in this coach. I'd rather go to jail than to leave this coach. That's where you'll be going. What exactly what are you trying to do? You see, because I look white, I bought a first-class ticket and took my seat in this first-class car. Didn't do you much good, did it? It's a challenge to the Jim Crow law that says colored folks cannot ride with whites. I think that law's just fine. Pretty soon you people just get up and sit any way you like. Talk with any way you please. And what is that law based upon? Color? I'm just as white as you. So the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States clearly states that there be no race distinction. That all of us, including myself and this man here, are one and the same. What we do know is that my removal from this train will come to the case in the federal courts. We'll just see about that, won't we? We'll just see. Indeed, we will, Mr. Detective. I'm certain we will.
But when the supporters of Homer Plessy brought the case of Plessy versus Ferguson to the Supreme Court, all of the justices, except John Marshall Harlan, upheld the laws of segregation. That meant that separate but equal was the law of the land. That decision was a big blow for all of us. It meant segregation was the rule for years and years to come. But we all know it's really now we have to move on. Mr. Rivers, fast forward, please.
Yeah, it did.
Well, here we are. In 1955, right back home in Montgomery, capital of the state of Alabama, we traveled together through many time periods. And how much has changed? Not enough, Miss Friend. The bus I'm waiting for still has seats reserved for whites only, and we folks sit where we can, if indeed we can sit at all. I can't have lunch at most of the restaurants downtown, but I can shop at the stores. And this is the year 1955, a full 90 years after the end of the Civil War, and 93 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. We are about to board our bus. Something will happen aboard this bus this evening that will change America. Please excuse me. I hear our bus coming now. So goodbye, and remember, we are a strong people. And if we keep fighting for our rights, Indeed, they must.
We are now at the Rosa Parks Museum. We just went through the time traveling bus. And now we're gonna go to another part of the tour, but I'm not allowed to record on this part of the tour. My hair look crazy. Natural life. Now that we are done with the tours, we are at, I don't know where we at. What is it? Jimmy John's. I don't even like sandwiches. You want some mayonnaise? Come on, get him some mayonnaise. We're gonna get you some mayonnaise. I hate mayonnaise. I hate mayonnaise. Me too. How you gonna say me too, but you want it on your sandwich? Squeeze it on there. That's enough? Where you get napkins from? Huh? Squeeze some mayonnaise on this side. Squeeze. Hey, that's enough. Oh. Say thank you for this food. Say bow your head. Thank you for this food, Jesus. Bless the hands that prepared this. Amen. And what kind of sandwich you got? Ew, I hate mayonnaise. What kind of sandwich you got? A ham and cheese. And I have a tuna sandwich. I can open it. Say mukbang. Cheers. That's so hard. There it is. Tell them what your name is. In the camera. Tell the viewers what's your name. Tell me your name. Say my name Logan.
What's that name? What's that name? What's that name?
Tell them we on vacation. Wait till you chew that up. I know it's a little tart. I mean, a little dry. A little dry. That sounds dry. I wonder if they have mustard packs. They have mustard packs. You ain't got no mustard. You ain't got no mustard. You ain't got no mustard. You ain't gonna show me nothing.
I got a mustard.
You got mayonnaise.
I got mustard.
That is mayonnaise. You want some more mayonnaise? Don't say that no more. He's talking about his party. Let's make the light brighter. It makes us darker. You see me in the camera. Tell the people hey. Say hey. Say hey. Lay your hand to the camera. You being lame. Get off this thing. Somebody come eat his sandwich. And we will be back when we're done eating. And when we do a little bit shopping. Yeah. Peace.
Got you back up there. Got you back up there. Be careful. Oh shit, I'll be able to make it fit.
Do the 15 this time. And then when We are back from today's festivities, y'all. I just seen a pizza man in a Challenger with the dominoes on the top. I ain't never seen that. Never, ever. I tried to get a picture, but that wasn't gonna work. Like, that must be his own car, because I would not put that on top of my car and mess it up. If it messes up. And I am drinking coffee at, I don't even know what time it is. It's like 7 o'clock. And my baby, he is not out. But we're eating hamburgers tonight, and I'm really upset because I wanted pizza. Like, I really want some pizza. But I guess I'll wait till I get back home to eat pizza. I want pizza. I want some pizza. I guess we're gonna eat hamburgers. But yes, that is a wrap for today. See you guys in my next vlog. Peace. And don't forget to subscribe.